Good morning, and welcome to another edition of the St. Luther Missionary Baptist Church Sunday School Summary for August 16, 2020. We're still in our summer quarter, Unit 3 of that quarter, which is Faith and Wisdom in James. Today's lesson comes from James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. Our background scripture is the same, chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. And our devotional reading is from Matthew chapter 18, verses 23 through 35. Today's lesson is entitled, Just Do It. Now we know that Just Do It is this slogan for the firm or the company Nike. And when Nike tells us to just do it, it means that we do whatever we want to do or whatever we would like to do, as long as we do it in their apparel. But when we put this in context relative to today's lesson, just do it does not mean that we can do anything that we would like to do. It refers to doing those things that God would have us to do, doing those things that please Him. And it also implies that once we are saved, we're not just saved to be saved, but that we are required to do something. Faith is required, but then works is also required. So in today's lesson, our aim for our students is to compare and contrast a faith that is more than empty talk with a faith that is proved by action. Reflect on the power of Abraham and Rahab's example of faith in action, and to commit as Christians to demonstrating faith with tangible works. If we look at chapter 2 in the book of James, it starts out telling us that we should not be partial, that we should treat everybody the same. In this day and time, we have a tendency to look upon people according to their backgrounds, according to their ethnicity, according to their social status, and we treat them one way or another based on how we view them. But if we follow the example of the Good Samaritan, we know that that we should treat everyone as we would want to be treated. A lot of times we look at the story of the Good Samaritan and we see the preacher and the deacon, and they pass by on the other side, and we're critical of them. But the fact of the matter is, in a lot of cases, we do the same thing. We have people who come to us and request our help, and we tell them, oh, we'll pray for you. But that is not the kind of action that God would want us to take. He requires us to love one another as we love ourselves. Now, if we love someone in need like we love ourselves, then we would not allow them to come to us and request our help and us not provide that help to them. As we look at our lesson today, and our lesson comes from chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. And it's got three different outlines. The first outline is verses 14 through 19. And if we want to give it a title, it could be live faith versus dead faith. And what we see here is that it's like James is in court, and he is making a case. And basically, what he's saying is that faith without works is dead, and works without faith is also dead. Now, an example of that is that folk go out and talk about the faith that they have. And we learned in last week's lesson that talk is cheap. They talk about the faith that they have, but they don't really have those works that back up that faith. And then there are others who go out and perform what they would consider to be good works, but then they don't have faith. And so works without faith is also dead. So what we're saying then is that faith and works go together. In other words, if we have faith, then our works complete our faith. Without the works to go along to back up what we're saying, then we don't really, we're incomplete. What we're doing is incomplete. So we need to have faith and works in order to please God. God expects us to be obedient. If we're going to be obedient, then that means that we need to we need to do something. He requires all sorts of things of us in the Bible. And if we don't do those things, then it's hard for us to say to anybody that we have faith. We have to trust God and do what it is He requires of us. So if we look at our first outline, live faith versus dead faith, we see verse 14. James is asking a question. He's getting started out by asking a question. He said, "What doeth it profit, my brother, though a man say he has faith and have not works? Can faith save him?" So some might say that that's a rhetorical question. But James answers that question, and the answer is no. Because we can say that we have faith all day, but if we don't put our faith into action, then it doesn't do us really any good to say that we have faith. And he goes on, he prosecutes his case. Basically what he says then is, if a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, and be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doeth it profit? So what God would expect of us is that when someone would come to us in a condition needing our help, is that we shouldn't just be able to say to them, go away, I'll pray for you. Everything is going to be all right. It requires us to act. It requires us to provide them with the assistance that they need. We might, and one of you might say then, and that's what he goes on to say, unto them, depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things that are needful to the body, what doeth it prosper? I see a lot of time when we try to minister to people about the love of God, and at the same time those people are in need of those things of physical needs. They have physical needs, and we don't address those. Well, it's very hard to reach individuals that have physical needs with the word without addressing those physical needs. So when we say that we have faith and that we are going to we serve God, then we need to know that and understand that that requires us to help those folk who are in need of our help. And he goes on to say, even so, if it has not works, is dead being alone. Again, faith without works is dead. That is James's statement. And if we, it's not enough for us to go around talking about the faith that we have without doing those things that are necessary to demonstrate that we have that faith that we speak of. Yea, a man may say, yea, a man may say that thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Faith is intangible. You can't see it, but you can see the works that a person does. You can't show anybody your faith by just saying that you have it. You have to demonstrate that faith by doing those things that God requires of us to do. And then he goes on to say, James is still making his case. He said, thou believest that there is one God, thou doest well. The devil also believed and trembled. There are those who believe that God exists. So that is ain't nothing strange about that. Everybody believes that. So for us to go about and say, I believe in God, I have faith in God, that's not enough. Folks need to be able to look at us and see God in us. We are the only God that folk will see physically. So we need to be what God requires us to be. When folk look at us, they ought to be able to see God in us. And he goes on. He goes on to prosecute his case. He's still making a case. And you know, when you're in court, a lot of times you have to present evidence. So what James goes on to do, he talks about Abraham. So he goes into the second outline in today's lesson. What about Abraham? And verse 20 says, but wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead. If you read it in the NIV, it says, you foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without works is useless? Then he goes on to talk about Abraham. And he says, was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son up on the altar? And you know, they were all familiar. They were familiar with their father Abraham. They were familiar with his life. And basically what James was telling them was, here Abraham, he is being made a promise that he was going to have a son. And he was old when the promise was made. And he was 100 years old when this son was born by his wife, Sarah. And then what happened? God sends an angel to him to tempt him, to tell him to take that very same son that had been promised to him and offer him up on the altar. Well, what did Abraham do? Abraham did just what he was told to do. As a matter of fact, he said he got up early in the morning and headed toward Mount Moriah. And he had his knife, he had his wood for the altar, and he took a couple of other fellows along. And when he got close to the mountain, he told those fellas to stay here till we come back. And when he went into the mountain, he built the altar. He tied his son up, and was about to slay him. And the angel told him to stay his hand. And we know the rest of the story, that he had a ram in the bush. But that's the kind of faith that God expects of us. When he tells us to do something, he expects us to just do it. Just do it. Seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect. In other words, it would have been one thing for him to believe in God or to believe God, but not only did he believe, but he acted on his faith. And what happened? God brought him out. And the scripture was fulfilled with Abraham, that Abraham what? Believed God. And it was imputed unto him for righteousness. And he was called friend of God. He was given a title, friend of God. Now, if we read John chapter 15, verses 14 and 15, we find that we can be friends of God. One of many friends of God. But Abraham was called the friend of God. He was given a title. Verse 24 says, you see then how that by works a man is justified, and not by faith only. So if we look at it, then we can't say that all we need to do is to confess Jesus Christ, and once we accept him, that we don't have to do anything else. God requires much more of us than that. That is the first step. It's an event. But when we look at sanctification, being made useful to God, we know that that's a process that requires study, a process that requires us to enter into a relationship with God. So such that when he comes to us and tells us what he wants us to do, then we don't even hesitate. We just do it. Just do it. The last part of outline in today's lesson has to do with Rahab. Rahab's example. Now, what James is doing now, he's still prosecuting his case. He is showing them evidence so that they believe that faith without works is dead. We know that Rahab was not an Israelite. Rahab lived in Jericho. Rahab was a harlot. And basically what happened was, when Joshua sent his spies out to spy out Jericho, Rahab had heard about it. She had heard about the Israelites and how God had brought them across the Red Sea, and how he had taken care of them in the wilderness, and how he had helped them to defeat the Amorites and all these things. And she said when she heard these things, her heart just dropped. And so when those men came to her, the king found out about it, and he sent his men to capture them. Well, instead of her working with the king, what she did was she hid them. She hid them, and then she let them down the wall of her house into the courtyard, told them to go into the mountains and stay a couple of days so that they would not be captured. In other words, she sent the king's men on a wild goose chase. You know, it's a good thing to be on the right side. And anytime you're on God's side, you are on the right side. And so what happened? She was blessed as a result of that. When Joshua came and they defeated Jericho, her father's house and all her possessions, everything she had, was saved. And not only that, she ended up in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Rahab was married to Salmon, and Salmon was Boaz's father. So she was on the right side, and as a result, she was blessed. Our last verse says, "For as the body is without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also." And when I read that, I thought about Adam. When God created man, he created him of the dust of the earth. And he laid there, and he became a living soul once God breathed the breath of life into him. And so that's the way faith and works go together. You can have faith and no works, then it's just like having a dead body. But when you add works and faith together, then what you have is what? Action. Things can happen. Life happens. And this lesson is a very good lesson, because what happens a lot of times is we think that we don't have things that are required of us. But we need to understand that God created us for a purpose, and he has a purpose for all of our lives. And the best thing for us to do is to find out where we fit in. And when God comes to us and tells us to do anything, that we do just what the title of this lesson said. We just do it. I'd like to close by reading from our teacher's book. And basically what it says is, talking about your faith alone is not enough. If your calling, vocation, or life's work, do it enthusiastically to the Lord, knowing that whatever good you do, you will receive back from the Lord, and hear the words of Jesus, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So my admonishment to you as members of our Sunday school class is that when God calls upon us, we have no hesitation. We just do it. Thank you for listening, and have a very good Sunday.